We're just into, I think this is the fourth talk in a series called Radical Reality. I think Vidanya also called it in his introductory talk, Shocking Buddhist Ideas. And you've already had one talk on the shocking idea that you can't fix samsara. That was Satyajoti a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And last week you heard from Mokshatara that suffering isn't so bad, maybe. Okay. And tonight's talk is billed as "It's simple, really." And actually, when I got to start to writing the talk, I started by thinking, well, that's not just challenging, it's just so obviously not true. If it's really simple, why doesn't everybody who does an introductory course, all 6 weeks of it, end up enlightened? That would really bring people in, wouldn't it? 6-week free course, enlightenment guaranteed. If it's simple, then why aren't people enlightened by the time they become mitras, or by the time they have finished the 4-year mitra training course, or at least by the time they get ordained? I mean, it's such a long training for ordination. You would think that by that time you would have got somewhere. And I notice that people at the beginning of the Buddhist path tend to think that enlightenment is going to come along with the higher teachings that they're going to get to a little bit later. And so tonight I'm going to tell you a shocking secret. Not only is it that it's simple, really, there are no higher teachings. None at all. Sorry. So I'm going to start with relating something from my own early experience of Buddhism. And this is a long time ago. I did my introductory course before there was even a Buddhist Centre or any sort of Triratna Buddhist presence in Sheffield. So it was 26 years ago, something like that. I did it in Leeds because that was the nearest Buddhist centre. And at the time I was working for a big financial institution. I was involved in these great big complex projects. I worked very hard. I played quite hard. I had quite a busy social life. I just had a really busy life. So it probably wouldn't surprise any of you to know that I learned the mindfulness of breathing and I learned the metta bhavana. And I didn't half struggle with them. I had very, very little concentration, loads of distraction, nowhere near dhyana and the blissful states that I would read about in books on meditation, which I found terribly disappointing. And then, of course, no insights, no sort of penny dropping, and suddenly I realised all about the nature of reality. So, quite a lot of disappointment in a way. And then I got hold of a copy of a book, and it's quite a good book. We've still got it at home. It's called How to Meditate. It's by a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner called Kathleen MacDonald, and it's a kind of manual of lots of different meditation techniques. And I thought, this is it. Somewhere in this book there is a meditation that is going to do it for me. And I had great hopes for it, and I did work my way through several of the meditations in the book, hoping to find one that was going to just be the right one for me, that was going to launch me on my path. But slowly, gradually, disappointingly, it dawned on me that it wasn't the meditation techniques that I'd been given that were the problem. Really, it was my mind and just the conditions of my life that was stopping me from getting on and having concentrated meditations. So I went back. What else could I do? I went back to the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana, and I plodded along with them for many years. And after a while, I began to notice that actually, although my meditation wasn't transformed and I wasn't getting a lot of dhyana, actually, the meditation was transforming me and that I was changing quite a lot. So, it was having an effect. Okay, so fast forward to the introductory courses that we run here at this Buddhist Centre. Now, most people here have probably been on one of those courses, either to learn meditation and Buddhism or to support, because we have a great Sangha who come along and support the courses that we run. So a lot of you will have observed what I'm going to describe. So it's something that usually happens at tea break during the introductory course. Lots and lots of people milling around, people talking, and then you get the lone person who is standing at the bookshelves, and they're picking up books on Zen practice, and they're picking up books on Tibetan practice, and you go and talk to them, and they say that they're looking for a book, so you try to steer them towards the lovely table that we've set out that says recommended books. And on that table there is introducing Buddhism, and there's the heart and the mind and the body, and you say, well, maybe this would help, and what sort of thing are you looking for? And what they really want is the one that they've picked up that sounds really exciting. And even though you've advised them that they could start with the breath, that would be a good place to start, they go away clutching highest yoga tantra or essence of Zen Buddhism. Okay, and they go away probably quite happy in the knowledge that they're ahead of the game, and they're going to progress an awful lot quicker than all of the plodders who constitute the rest of the people on the course. And probably, if they persevere, which they might not, most people probably don't, and if they can get their heads round the Tibetan iconography and the Tibetan terminology, if they're not completely confused, which many of them will be, they'll hopefully realise that the teachings that that book is trying to get at are exactly the same teachings as they're getting on the introductory and intermediate course that we teach here. Only we are cutting to the quick. We've pulled out the basic Buddhism, the basic Buddhist teachings, and we're teaching those in a way that's suitable for people living in Sheffield in the 21st century, without any of the kind of the baggage that goes with Tibetan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism or whatever you have. So interesting, isn't it? We are all tempted by the higher teachings. We do tend to think that there must be a quicker way, a way that will make it easier for us. But disappointingly, there are no higher teachings. There's nothing that's going to propel you at rocket-like speed along the Buddhist path. There's nothing that's going to make the penny drop so that, bingo, you go to insight. No books, no Mitra study texts, no websites, not even Sangha Night talks, I'm afraid to say. But I hope you'll stay for the rest of this one, which is a terrible shame. On the other hand, the Theravada Buddhist movement that we're a part of is known for its emphasis on knowing the Dharma. On making sure that the people in our movement, especially the people who become mitras or who are training for ordination, do actually know the Dharma well. And at Sheffield Buddhist Centre, on Tuesday nights, we try to give you an interesting and stimulating and relevant talk on the Dharma, something that you can take away and apply in your lives. When you become a mitra, you will be offered the opportunity to take a 4-year Dharma training course with a group of other mitras. And before you are ready to be ordained, you will be expected to have got a good knowledge of the Dharma as taught by Sangharacchita. That's one of the things that is looked for when people are approaching ordination. So, in a way, tonight's talk is about why it is both true that we need to know the Dharma and that there are no higher teachings. And I'm going to illustrate that with a story from the Tibetan tradition. So it's a story from the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa, a fairly heavy tome. It's a book of stories about and poems or songs of a medieval Tibetan hermit and yogi. So Milarepa is famous for having lived long spells in caves and wild places in the mountains in Tibet. And incidentally, for living on nettles when he couldn't get anything else to eat, which apparently made him turn green. But he's also famous for his poetry, which you can find in this book. And he's very much revered in Tibet as an enlightened being, as a Buddha even. And Milarepa had lots of disciples to whom he taught the Dharma, many of whom became enlightened themselves. And the most famous of them is probably someone called Gampopa, that you might come across if you read any of those books on Tibetan Buddhism on the shelves in the bookshop. He's a very famous figure who founded the Kagyu monastic tradition. Anyway, of all his disciples, there was one that Milarepa was particularly fond of, and that disciple was called Rinpoche. Milarepa referred to Rinpoche as his heart's, as his spiritual son, And the story I'm going to tell, there's lots about Rinpoche in that book, but the story I'm going to tell is a story of Rinpoche's visit to India. It's his second or third visit to India. He had been when he was a much younger man. And visiting India actually had quite a lot of significance in medieval Tibet. So, Tibet in the Middle Ages, this must be 11th century, I think. Tibet at that time was regarded by its inhabitants as a bit of a wild place. Although there were many monasteries and there were lots of Buddhist practitioners, the real heartland of Buddhism at that time was still India. And India is where the authentic Buddhist texts and teachings were regarded as being. In a sense, you could say that Tibetans regarded India in those days in a similar way to the way that Westerners often regard Tibet now. It's where the authentic teachings come from. If someone is Tibetan, they must know. Basically, what happens at the beginning of the story is Rinpoche tells Milarepa that he's going to travel to India to get some Buddhist texts. And Milarepa isn't delighted. He says, well, you've been to India before. Actually, what you really need now is to stay at home and to practice. You need to practice what you've learned. You've got enough learning now to carry you a long way. What you really need is to settle down and practice. But Rinpoche is determined he's going to go. And they have quite an argy-bargy about it. They have quite an argument. In the end, Milarepa throws up his hands and he says, what can I say? I advise you not to go. I've told you what I think you need to do, but I can't stop you. So if you're going to India, then go. So Rinpoche goes. He crosses the Himalayas, braving snows and storms and bandits, and eventually, probably years later, returns to Tibet with a big collection of books from India. But when he and Milarepa meet again, all is not well. First of all, Rinpoche is very, very proud of having got these texts, these books from India. And he's a bit miffed that Milarepa isn't being sufficiently respectful at the advanced teachings that he's now acquired in India. And when the two are reunited for the first time, he bows to Milarepa as his guru, as you're expected to if you're a disciple of someone in Tibet, in medieval Tibet. But he thinks that now Milarepa should return the compliment and bow to him because he's an advanced practitioner with teachings from India. And he's really, really put out, in addition, that Milarepa isn't impressed with his books. So all that is sort of resentment underneath the surface. Milarepa can sense it, but he's not kind of confronting it. And he suggests not what Rinpoche wants to do. Rinpoche wants to go off and show off his books to the people who funded his journey. But Milarepa says, no, what we need to do first of all is we need to go off and practice. We need to go off on our own and have a bit of a retreat. So they go off to a hermitage in the mountains, and they start to make camp. Milarepa builds a fire, Rinpoche goes for water. And someone in the audience knows, a couple of people know what happens. So Rinpoche goes off to fetch water, but he takes quite a long time because on the way, he's in the mountains, remember, on the way, he looks down to the plain and he can see a goat, a female goat, and she's giving birth. And he's really fascinated, and he kind of watches what's happening. It's happening in the distance, but he's kind of watching it. So he watches what happens, and while he watches, the goat is, the kid is born, the kid grows up, and then both the grown-up kid and the original mother have kids of their own, they give birth. And then they grow up, and then all four give birth, and then they grow up, and all eight, and is it 8? Anyway, it was 16 by that time, but anyway. It sort of goes on and goes on. These goats just are reproducing. And he keeps counting the goats, and when he gets to 200, he suddenly remembers what he's meant to be doing. And he goes and fetches the water and makes his way back to the camp where Milarepa is sitting by the fire. And so the story, because the story continues, it's fairly obvious that Rinpoche hasn't been away for years on end. I think that the goats thing is a kind of mythical way of describing what can happen when our minds get really distracted. How our thoughts kind of multiply and then multiply again until we're miles away from what we're supposed to be doing. Anyway. On the way back to the hermitage, Rinpoche kind of looks ahead and he smells burning, and it isn't the burning of wood that he can smell. And he suddenly has a suspicion. He thinks that what he can smell is burning parchment. And sure enough, when he gets back to where Milarepa is with his fire, there's this huge pile of ash and a few wooden boot covers. And that's all that he can see of his books. So, Rinpoche is angry, to say the least. Milarepa tells him that the books were just distracting him from his practice, and therefore he would be better off without them. But Rinpoche is furious. Which is perhaps understandable. He's been all the way to India, brought these books back. And it does seem a very harsh lesson. In fact, Milarepa has looked through the books, and he's quietly put away safely the books that he thinks are real Dharma books, and the ones that he's burnt he thinks are completely worthless and actually misleading. But Rinpoche doesn't know it at this point. So Rinpoche at this point he's beside himself with righteous indignation. How dare Milarepa be so disrespectful? He refuses to listen whenever Milarepa tries to explain why he's done it and what the purpose of the bonfire was. You could say that he sends Milarepa to Coventry, or whatever the Tibetan equivalent of Coventry is. He is refusing to listen to Milarepa, and he's refusing to speak to him. And Milarepa tries out all sorts of things to try to get his attention back. But, like anyone who's in a real rage, Rinpoche refuses to come round. Even when Milarepa performs a whole lot of miracles to pull Rinpoche out of his sulk. And I'm going to read you just a little bit of the passage. There's a great long chapter on this. This is describing one of Milarepa's miracles, just to try and get his disciples' attention again. It says, instantaneously this wondrous vision took form. Upon Milarepa's head, the translator Marpa is Milarepa's own teacher, his own guru. The translator Marpa appeared clearly as Padmasambhava, sitting upon the sun and moon, encircling him with the gurus of transmission. You don't need to know what these things are, but you get the idea. There's this amazing sight happening with Milarepa at the centre of it. To the right and left of Milarepa's eyes and ears shone two suns and moons. From his nostrils streamed rays of light in 5 different colours, like silk threads. From his eyebrows shone a radiant light. His tongue became a small 8-petaled lotus seat, with a sun and moon orb above it, from which sparkled brilliant and extremely fine letters, as if written by a single split hair. From his heart rayed forth other beams of light, which then turned into numerous small birds. Whereupon Milarepa sang a song. And I'm not going to sing you the song because it's very long, but the last line of it, the last verse of it, is, "Richumpa, listen to me for a moment. From the centre of my heart stream glowing beams of light." Okay. Amazing it may be to watch the play of goats, but how can it compare to this wondrous game? So, Milarepa he's willing to try anything to try and get his disciples' attention back, and Richumpa is just sitting. In fact, the next paragraph starts, Richumpa, however, paid no attention to the Jetson's advice. The Jetson is his guru, Milarepa. But sat there silently and in deep resentment. He looked askance at the miraculous scene, but showed not the slightest sign of interest in it. And then he said, "There's nothing surprising in all this. It's more amusing to watch the play of goats." So, okay, you get the idea. There's lots more to it. Richumpa next starts slicing boulders with his hand. Richumpa's not impressed. Milarepa rises into the sky and hovers there like a great hawk. And then he darts to the ground like a flash of lightning. Richumpa continues to sulk. And he doesn't actually come out of his sulk until Milarepa just disappears completely. Nowhere to be seen. Richumpa looks all around, he can't find him. And then suddenly he begins to get worried that that's the last he's seen of his guru, and that actually he's going to have to practice on his own in future. And then he comes to his senses and he feels terrible remorse. But he's fortunate. Milarepa reappears, they're reconciled, and Milarepa sings a long song of reconciliation, which I won't read, because all you need to hear is the first sentence of the first verse, and that is, "Richumpa, my son, whom from childhood I have cherished, if you wish to attain Buddhahood, you must practice the pith instructions." So, if you wish to attain Buddhahood, you must practice the pith instructions. So, pith instructions. The pith, sort of the centre of a tree trunk or of a plant, the core of it, the bit that supports the rest of the plant. So the pith instructions, they're the core instructions. They're the basic ones without which there can be no other instructions. The instructions that everything else kind of hangs off. And, so not the highest teachings, the most basic ones. That's what Richumpa needs to hear. And Milarepa Richumpa, or the lesson that Milarepa is trying to teach Richumpa is a lesson that many other Buddhist teachers through time have tried to teach people. So our own principal teacher and founder, Sangha coined this phrase, "There are no higher teachings." In fact, what he said is, there are no higher teachings, only deeper understandings. No higher teachings, only deeper understandings. Padmasambhava, the great bodhisattva who's credited with introducing Buddhism to Tibet, as part of his parting advice to the Queen of Tibet, says, "The books and letters which you do not practice, give them up." He's making the point that there's absolutely no point in accumulating all sorts of books about Buddhism, all sorts of texts about the things that you could do. Because if you're not doing them, if you're not practicing, they're not helping you. You might as well just give them up. And then a similar point is made by Bodhidharma to the Emperor of China, no less. Bodhidharma was a Buddhist monk who lived in the 5th or 6th century. Traditionally, he's credited as being the person who introduced Chan or Zen Buddhism to China. So he's regarded as the first Chinese patriarch of Zen Buddhism. And he's a very, very celebrated teacher in medieval China. And because he's probably one of the most famous teachers at the time, the emperor summons him for some private lessons in Buddhism, some private teachings. And he asks Bodhidharma for some appropriate teachings. And Bodhidharma says, "Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the heart." The emperor said, "Is that all?" And he says, "Yes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the heart." And the emperor's very disappointed. He's a bit indignant. He thinks his intelligence has been insulted. Is that really all? Even a child of 3 could understand that. And Bodhidharma replied famously, "Yes, Your Majesty, Your Imperial Majesty, probably. But even an old man of 80 cannot put it into practice." Which is probably quite cheeky, actually. He might have been pushing his luck. But, the point is not to gather more and more and more teachings, but to practice the ones that you have got more and more deeply. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the heart. And, that could be the practice of a lifetime. So, no higher teachings, only deeper understandings, as Sangharakshita says. Or as he says elsewhere, we need to practice more and more of less and less. Or, as Padmasambhava and Bodhidharma both say, the only teachings that are any use to you are the ones that you practice. So it's simple, really. We need to practice the Dharma that we do know more and more deeply. And I suppose that's been true, as demonstrated, from the earliest days of Buddhism. But it's probably especially hard for us to accept in the 21st century. Even in medieval Tibet, a Buddhist could mistake or confuse acquiring teachings, acquiring books, with advancing their practice, as Rinpoche did. So what chance have we got? Rinpoche had to cross the Himalayas and brave bandits and avalanches and all sorts of things to get his teachings. All we've got to do is go downstairs to the library or the bookshop, or turn on our laptops, or even turn on our mobile phones, and we've got as many teachings as we want available to us. And the other problem for us, I think, is that we live in a very acquisitive age. We live in an age where we're constantly being offered the technique that will help us to lose weight, lose our wrinkles, overcome our stress, be happy, get insight. It's all available there on the web at the touch of a button with an easy technique. And we tend to believe what we hear, that, it ought to be easy, really. Okay, so what can we do? How is this relevant to us? What can we do if there are no higher teachings? In fact, if we need to practice more and more of less and less, is there any point in learning more and more about the Dharma? But the answer is not to stop reading, and it's not to stop coming to Sangha Night. So don't resign from your study group. Don't throw away your Dharma books. we do actually need the Dharma teachings. Most of us really don't know enough Dharma, not nearly enough. The thing is that we need to know in a different way, in a deeper way than just knowing the definition of something, or knowing the list, or knowing kind of what the Sangha Night talk was about, without actually having thought about it and without having practiced it. And that kind of knowledge, the kind of knowledge that we need, it comes from two things. It comes from growth, and it comes from going deeper with the teachings. So, being true to It's Simple Really title, I've got two very basic, very simple Buddhist lists. And the first one is the threefold path of practice. It's a threefold path that we follow on the introductory course: ethics, meditation, and wisdom. And, why is it important? Well, this one is important because you can't leap straight into deeper wisdom without growing your being first. There's something about the Buddhist path that is simply about growth, about making yourself a bigger being that's going to be big enough to be able to deepen your practice and to deepen your wisdom. So you grow yourself, first of all, by putting yourself in a proper relationship with the world through practicing ethics, by continually finding the gap and changing your habits so your actions and your whole being, in a way, will grow. You grow by refining your awareness and your mental states through meditation. And you grow, well, with those two as a basis, ethics and meditation as a basis, then you might have a chance of deepening your understanding. Not suddenly by some clever technique or by hearing the right esoteric teaching, but slowly and gradually and reliably. Because that's the thing about the threefold path. It is the threefold path of practice. It's been tried and tested by Buddhist practitioners over millennia, and it works. Okay, ethics, meditation and wisdom brings us to a second very basic Buddhist list, which is the 3 levels of wisdom. Hearing, reflecting and meditating. So you do need to hear the Dharma. You need to keep coming to Sangha Night. You need to keep going to your Mitra study group if you've got one. You need to keep reading Dharma books. But you also need to know that just hearing or just reading usually isn't enough. It's kind of enough to give you an overview. It's enough to give you the basic concepts, the basic ideas. But it's not enough to take you all the way to enlightenment. That's just the first level of wisdom. That's just hearing. For hearing, you can also read reading. That's just the first level of wisdom. And you need to know that that's preliminary. It's a really important preliminary, but it's preliminary. It's superficial, it's conceptual. When you've heard a teaching, you need to take it deeper into your being. Those of you who came on the Lokabrook retreat will remember that we had the figure of Manjughosha, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, holding a book to his heart. The book was the perfection of wisdom. And we talked about holding a teaching to your heart. Just taking some basic teaching, perhaps some quote from a Buddhist text, or just something very simple like a precept, or even a word, a principle like kindness or generosity, taking it and holding it to your heart. And that's in a sense what we're trying to do by reflecting and meditating. So, you probably can't reflect and meditate on every single thing that you hear at Sangha Night, or at every single Dharma teaching that you read in a book. So you probably do need to be selective. And you can be selective in a practical way by just choosing something that you've heard at Sangha Night that kind of chimed with you, or by choosing something that you're preparing for your next Mitra group discussion, because that's going to help you to prepare. But you could choose something that just grabs you, or puzzles you, or inspires you, or scares you, or even something that you really don't like, because it's amazing how much we can learn from things that we really react to. And as I say, it doesn't have to be something long and complicated. It could be something as simple as generosity. What does generosity really mean? What does it mean in practice? And I've got a few suggestions which aren't a Buddhist list. This is just Suryamati's suggestions about some ways that we can reflect on things. What we did at Upper Group was we wrote it down. We did an illuminated text with our teaching, the thing that we wanted to take to our hearts, written on it and decorated in colour. And it's amazing how just the concentration and single-mindedness that's involved in writing something down that might be quite simple, it's amazing how much that helps it to go in, that helps you to just absorb it. You can learn it by heart if it's a quote. Many of us make a practice, those of us who've been around for a while might make a practice of learning the Heart Sutra by heart. But there are lots of much smaller teachings that you could learn by heart. If you're relatively new, you might like to learn the Buddhist precepts by heart in English. Okay, if you learn something by heart, you've got a portable teaching. Something that you can just bring out and think about whenever you've got some time. So you'll have your portable teaching for when you turn it over in your mind. So turning something over in your mind is the usual way of reflecting on things. You just kind of think, well, what does it mean? What does generosity mean? What would it mean to me? Who do I know that's generous? Just move your mind around it. You can ask your heart and gut about it, whatever it is. Why do I get so wound up by when someone says something? Why do I get so wound up by that teaching? How does it make me feel? Or why do I get so inspired when I hear about whatever it is? You can write around it. One of the things that I find that I need to do if I'm not clear about something is I write it down. The process of making it into sentences and making it clear for myself, it just helps to clarify my mind. So writing it down really helps for me. And we can discuss it, which we're going to do after this talk, and which we do every Sangha Night. And which, by the way, is the reason that we always have a discussion on Sangha Night. Because once you've heard a bit of Dharma, it's really useful to help it go deeper by just talking about it. It's a way of reflecting on it. So then, you might try any of those, and you might also try the third level of wisdom, reflecting and meditating on your Dharma teaching, which traditionally you do once you've got your mind clear and concentrated through doing another practice like the mindfulness of breathing. So traditionally people will often spend a bit of time at the end of their meditation session reflecting on some piece of Dharma that they've heard recently that they want to go deeper with. Okay, so reflecting and by hearing and reflecting and meditating on a Dharma teaching, in a way we take them to a deeper part of ourselves and we allow them to seep into our beings and to affect our lives and our practice, our Buddhist practice. And that means that we start to get to know the Dharma in a different way, in a deeper way than just in a conceptual way. I think perhaps it's important for us all to realise that, there's a difference between knowing, understanding something in a conceptual way, and really knowing it in an experiential way, knowing it kind of in our bodies from experience. And that's what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about the Dharma. When he talked about the Dharma, he often said that it was beyond the scope of conjecture. By which he meant was, it's beyond words and concepts. And so if we've got the idea, if we've got the words, if we've got the concept, well, that's a start. But really knowing the Dharma is much deeper than that. He said it's to be experienced by the wise. So that kind of the kind of knowing that we're aiming for with the Dharma is knowing in our experience. Okay, so I suppose you could say that there's a sense in which enlightenment is simple, because it is an experience. It doesn't require complicated logic. It doesn't require a vast memory or a huge IQ. In a way, it involves a different mode of being that's available to anybody, whatever their IQ is. And in many traditions, especially in the Zen tradition, I think, enlightened beings are often, at the moment of insight, said to burst out laughing, or to simply exclaim about how simple the whole thing is when it really sinks into their being, when they really experience it. And they think, well, why on earth didn't I manage that sooner? What have I been working at all those years? And I think that's because enlightenment is not something that you think your way to. Rather, it involves a shift of being that only happens when you've grown your being to be much, much bigger, and you've deepened and deepened and deepened your understanding of some of the basic teachings. And the way to prepare for that is to grow your being through ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So, I'll finish by saying something that struck me in a recent talk I read by Sangha Night, which shows that even becoming that very much humbler being, an order member, doesn't require a high IQ or the ability to remember Buddhist lists. Because in this talk, Sangha says, it was a talk to order members actually, but he says he thinks it's important that at every Buddhist centre there should be one or two order members who are not great at remembering Dharmic formulations, but who nevertheless exemplify the Dharma life. They won't be teaching the Dharma, of course, he says, but what they're demonstrating is that the spiritual path is not about being clever. It's not even about knowing all of the Dharma. Rather, it's about practicing what you do know at a deeper and deeper level. So even after ordination, there are no higher teachings, only deeper only deeper understandings. We don't need higher teachings, only deeper understandings. We need to practice more and more of less and less, and we need to let what we do know seep into us at a deeper and deeper level. So that's it. It's simple, really. Thank you.